In the quiet suburb of Maplewood, where meticulously manicured lawns and perfectly painted fences ruled, lived Ethan Carver, a contractor for DARPA. Known for his meticulous attention to detail in both his professional and personal life, Ethan was the kind of neighbor who possessed an impressive array of tools, all neatly organized in his garage. This particular Saturday, however, marked a departure from his usual schedule of precision and structure. Eager to reclaim more space in his garage for his growing collection of gadgets and equipment, Ethan embarked on a reorganization project. He had just come across an old lab fridge, a relic from a previous government assignment that he had long forgotten. As he unloaded boxes filled with rusty tools and dusty files, he decided to place the fridge in the driveway. Just for a little while, he thought, intending to move it back shortly after sorting through the clutter. However, as time slipped by unnoticed, 3 hours ticked away while Ethan became engrossed in sorting and categorizing. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting shadows that danced around him in a rhythm only broken by the occasional hum of a passing car. Little did he know that his innocent oversight would soon lead to catastrophic consequences. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, prided itself on keeping the neighborhood pristine, and nothing grated on their sensibilities more than what they deemed visual blight. As the hours passed, their eagle-eyed officials caught sight of the old fridge sitting defiantly in Ethan's driveway. With their motto of maintaining appearances etched into their minds, they swiftly sprang into action. Within moments, a towing truck appeared unannounced, unbidden, and carted away the fridge without so much as a notification to its owner. Ethan emerged from his garage just in time to see his fridge disappear down the street, confusion clouding his features. Panic began to bubble as he recalled the contents within, a single vial of military-grade regeneration serum that had been designed for groundbreaking experiments before its delivery to a secure facility. His heart raced as he ran toward where the truck had vanished. Fueled by urgency and anxiety over what could happen if that serum fell into the wrong hands or was mishandled, Ethan began connecting dots. He suspected the HOA would be behind this hasty removal and resolved to track down his fridge. As he learned that it was stored in the HOA's clubhouse utility closet, a mix of determination and dread coursed through him. Complications arose when an uninvited visitor, a raccoon drawn by curiosity, was about to tip the scales of chaos even further. Unbeknownst to Ethan or the HOA members guarding their prideful aesthetic guidelines, the true adventure was just beginning. As Ethan raced through the neighborhood, panic fueled his every step. The consequences of the HOA's hasty decision had escalated from mere inconvenience to potential disaster. Inside that unassuming old lab fridge lay a vial of experimental military-grade regeneration serum, a revolutionary breakthrough that could change the landscape of medical treatment and battlefield recovery. The serum was the culmination of years of research by top scientists and engineers at DARPA, specifically designed to enhance cellular regeneration and repair. It held the promise of healing grievous wounds, regenerating lost limbs, and even countering the effects of aging at a cellular level. Intended for delivery to a highly secure military facility, its potential applications were unprecedented. If it fell into the wrong hands or was subjected to mishandling, the ramifications could be catastrophic, not just for Ethan, but for national security itself. Ethan's mind raced as he recalled the timeline for the serum's delivery. A secretive transfer was scheduled for the following day, when a specialized military transport would arrive to collect it. The urgency was palpable. Not only did he have to recover the fridge before it could be tampered with, but he also needed to ensure that no one discovered what lay within it. The HOA, with its penchant for intrusive regulations and a desire to maintain neighborhood aesthetics, would not understand the gravity of the situation. Their focus on appearances blinded them to the real issues looming just beneath the surface. As Ethan approached the clubhouse where he suspected his fridge had been taken, his thoughts began to spiral into dark scenarios. Would he be forced to explain the nature of the serum to his neighbors? What if someone accidentally opened the fridge before he could get there? The very thought sent shivers down his spine. He envisioned headlines declaring local contractor's secret experiment exposed, followed by a frenzy of media scrutiny and government inquiry. Upon arriving at the clubhouse, Ethan was met with an eerie silence. The HOA members had clearly dispersed after their righteous act of towing away what they deemed unsightly. He quickly scanned the area for any signs of his fridge, anxiety gnawing at him with each passing second. As he approached the utility closet, he could only hope that it remained untouched. However, unbeknownst to him, curiosity had already drawn another visitor, the raccoon, into this unfolding drama. The creature's insatiable appetite would soon lead to a tangled web of chaos that would ensue once it encountered the vial within. As Ethan stood outside the utility closet wondering how best to retrieve his precious cargo without attracting attention, he felt a surge of determination wash over him. He had no time to waste. Not only was his career on the line, but potentially lives depended on his swift action. With that thought in mind, he made his move toward the utility closet, unaware of how drastically his day was about to change. The Maplewood Homeowners Association prided itself on maintaining the pristine appearance of the neighborhood, enforcing strict guidelines to ensure every lawn was manicured and every fence maintained its fresh coat of paint. Their motto, "A beautiful community is a happy community," echoed in the minds of its leaders like a battle cry. When they spotted Ethan's old lab fridge protruding into the driveway, it was as if a light bulb had gone off. It was their duty to act. Within minutes, a committee of HOA members convened, their expressions a mix of concern and righteous indignation. To them, the fridge represented more than just an eyesore. It epitomized what they feared most: visual blight. The term carried weight within their narrow worldview, representing anything that threatened the tranquil facade of their well-ordered lives. With the zeal of overzealous guardians of suburbia, they immediately voted to tow away the offending item without notifying Ethan. While Ethan was busy contemplating how to extract the fridge from the utility closet at his clubhouse, the HOA members took swift action. They contacted a local towing company and relayed their directive: remove the fridge immediately. It didn't occur to them to consider that this particular piece of blight might contain something more significant than mere leftovers or forgotten drinks. The emphasis on appearances had conditioned them to disregard context entirely. As the tow truck arrived and revved its engine, tension filled the air. A few HOA officials gathered outside, watching with satisfaction as their mission unfolded. It was almost ceremonious, like a victory parade for suburban governance. Their hands shook with power as they watched a representative of order clear away what they deemed an affront to their tightly wound ethos. However, in this fervor for conformity and control, there lurked an irony. The very thing that had been whisked away contained life-altering innovations that could reshape medical science and military medicine, an idea far beyond what the HOA could fathom. In their obsession with maintaining the neighborhood's aesthetic standards, they completely missed the larger implications that lay hidden beneath the surface. As Ethan continued his frantic sprint towards the clubhouse, unaware of the empty space in his driveway where his fridge once stood, he realized how little grasp the HOA had on reality. Misguided intentions had possibly unleashed consequences far beyond their comprehension. While they believed they were acting in the best interest of their community, they were carelessly altering its trajectory. Back at the clubhouse, as Ethan approached with urgency coursing through his veins, it appeared that chaos was about to get an unwelcome but curious visitor, a raccoon ready to disrupt their sanctimonious rule even further. The tension escalated. Ethan had no time to lose if he hoped to prevent disaster from unfolding amidst his neighborhood's misguided guardianship. As Ethan approached the clubhouse, a sense of dread washed over him. His heart raced as he took in the sight of the utility closet, the potential resting place of his lab fridge. Just moments ago, he had been consumed with thoughts of retrieving it, but now a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. The weight of what could be inside loomed large in his mind. He could only imagine the chaos that would unfold if someone were to stumble upon the vial of experimental military-grade regeneration serum. When he reached the utility closet door, it was locked, heightening his anxiety. He knocked frantically, but there was no answer. Desperation clawed at him as he scanned the area for any signs of HOA members who might still be lurking nearby. The realization hit him hard. If those responsible for towing away his fridge were still around, they might be oblivious to what they had truly taken. Ethan's thoughts began to race back to his recent interaction with the HOA at a neighborhood meeting, where the committee had expressed their commitment to upholding community standards while showing little regard for individual circumstances. Their obsession with aesthetics and order had blinded them to the real issues at hand. It was evident now that their focus on maintaining appearances came at a steep price, potentially endangering lives without a second thought. He took a few steps back, gathering himself to think clearly. A faint memory surfaced, a conversation he'd overheard about an HOA rule stating that any item deemed unsightly could be removed without notice if it obstructed public view. Suddenly, everything clicked into place: the swift towing, the lack of communication, and their unwavering dedication to maintaining a picture-perfect community. Ethan quickly pulled out his phone and began searching for the contact information of the towing company. He needed answers and fast. Each ringing tone felt like an eternity as he paced back and forth outside the clubhouse, mentally preparing for what he might have to confront once he got through. How would he explain that not only was this fridge not just an eyesore, but also contained a highly classified substance? Finally, someone picked up, and Ethan wasted no time getting straight to the point. "I need information about an old lab fridge that was just towed from my driveway," he stated urgently. As he spoke, adrenaline surged through him. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. The operator on the other end provided details about where it had been taken, the very clubhouse where Ethan stood now. Relief mingled with frustration as he hung up. At least now he had a lead to pursue. But as he turned back toward the utility closet with renewed determination, little did he know that chaos was already brewing within those walls. A rustling sound erupted from behind him, and Ethan's heart dropped as he realized what it meant. Curiosity had drawn in an unexpected visitor, the raccoon, who was about to turn this situation into something far more chaotic than he could have ever imagined. With urgency driving him forward, Ethan sprinted toward the door, desperate to prevent disaster from unfolding before his eyes. Ethan stood outside the clubhouse, his heart racing as he processed the implications of the information he'd just received from the towing company. The fridge was indeed inside within those walls, locked away in a utility closet that might hold his only chance of retrieving the vial of regeneration serum. Panic surged through him as he imagined what could happen if anyone, especially an HOA member, discovered it before he could act. With urgency propelling him forward, Ethan dashed toward the entrance, his mind racing with thoughts of probable outcomes. He could envision headlines flashing across news outlets, local contractor's secret experiment exposed, or even more horrifying, reports about illicit substances endangering neighborhood safety. He knew he needed to be stealthy and smart. Any misstep could lead to dire consequences, not just for him but for national security. As he reached the door to the utility closet, he hesitated briefly, listening intently for any sounds from within. Thoughts of the raccoon crept into his mind. It was a wild card in this already chaotic situation. What if it had somehow found its way into the fridge? The notion sent chills down his spine. Chaos would be at their doorstep if that little creature had ingested even a fraction of what lay inside. Ethan tried the handle and found it locked, which sparked another wave of anxiety. He glanced around to ensure no HOA members were in sight, then pulled out his phone again. This time, he typed furiously to search for a way to contact someone who could unlock the door for him, perhaps a board member or someone with access. Frustration mounted as each failed attempt seemed to rob him more of precious time. Just then, a rustling sound echoed from within the utility closet, sending a jolt through him. Ethan's heart sank. It had to be the raccoon getting comfortable amidst his misplaced assets. With every second counting against him, he rushed toward the nearest window to see if he could get a glimpse inside without alerting anyone. Peering through the glass, he felt both relief and horror wash over him. There it was, a furry bandit digging around on top of his lab fridge. The sight ignited something primal within Ethan. He couldn't allow this raccoon to turn a critical military asset into its playground or potentially unleash its contents on an unsuspecting community. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Ethan decided that waiting for authorization wouldn't cut it. He needed immediate action. He rushed back toward the entrance, hoping there might be another route into the clubhouse. As he sprinted around the side of the building, every instinct told him that time was slipping away faster than ever before. He was racing not just against time, but against a potential catastrophe, fueled by desperation and determination to reclaim what should never have been lost in the first place. Disregarding any safety protocols or HOA decorum, Ethan's resolve hardened. He would retrieve that fridge and keep its powerful contents safe, one way or another. As Ethan dashed around the side of the clubhouse, he was still grappling with the implications of the raccoon's presence in the utility closet, but nothing could prepare him for what happened next. Inside, that furry intruder had taken advantage of the fridge being left ajar. Unaware of its significance, the raccoon approached the gleaming vial nestled within, its curiosity overwhelming any instinct for caution. With a deft paw, it nudged the vial until it tipped over and shattered on the floor. The serum spilled out, shimmering in an otherworldly way under the fluorescent lights. The raccoon sniffed at it, its eyes wide with intrigue, then took a tentative lick. Almost instantly, a strange transformation began to unfold. Ethan was just about to reach for the door when he heard an unexpected commotion from within. A loud clatter followed by an unmistakable growl made him stop in his tracks. Heart pounding, he peered through a window and watched as the raccoon's body began to swell and bulk up dramatically. Fur bristled and muscles expanded grotesquely as it transformed into a much larger and more intimidating version of itself, a fierce creature that retained all its mischievousness but now possessed raw strength. Through wide eyes filled with shock and humor, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of panic and absurdity at what was unfolding before him. The now oversized raccoon bared its teeth in an alarming display before charging toward the utility closet door. With each powerful movement, it knocked over shelving units and discarded cleaning supplies like they were mere toys. Realizing he couldn't wait any longer, Ethan swung open the door just as a chaotic whirlwind erupted from inside. The transformed raccoon barreled into him, sending both of them tumbling to the ground in a flurry of fur and flailing limbs. In between astonished grunts and yelps, Ethan could barely believe what he was experiencing. This was no ordinary raccoon anymore. It was like something straight out of an absurd comic book. Ethan scrambled back to his feet, heart racing faster than ever. "Get off me!" he shouted at the bewildered creature that had now somehow become his adversary rather than just an unfortunate nuisance. The raccoon seemed unfazed by his protests. Instead, it tossed aside a mop bucket with astonishing strength before darting off toward the main area of the clubhouse. As chaos bubbled over within those walls, HOA members who had gathered nearby puzzled by the noises and rushing to investigate. The transformation led to an uproarious scene filled with shouting and laughter mingling with genuine fear. People pointed at Ethan as if he had orchestrated this madness. Desperate not only to recover his fridge, but also to manage this outrageous situation involving a now aggressive mutant raccoon roaming free among them, Ethan rushed after it. Sometimes the strangest chaos happens when you least expect it, and let's be honest, when mutant raccoons show up, it's probably time to subscribe. They say hitting that button prevents at least one HOA violation a week, but back to the story. He realized that this was more than just a race against time. It was a slapstick showdown between suburban tensions and unexpected science gone awry. With adrenaline fueling his every step, Ethan charged ahead into chaos armed only with determination and a willingness to embrace whatever absurdity lay ahead. He had no idea how he would resolve this situation, or what further mayhem awaited them all as he poised himself for an unlikely encounter with both mutant wildlife and middle-class madness intertwined in one unforgettable afternoon. The scene erupted into chaos as the mutated raccoon barreled through the clubhouse, its oversized frame sending chairs and tables flying. HOA members, initially drawn by curiosity to investigate the strange noises, now found themselves scrambling in all directions. Screams mingled with laughter as the creature darted past them, its wild energy igniting a panic that spread through the community like wildfire. "Get it out! Someone stop it!" shouted Mrs. Henderson, the HOA president, her meticulously styled hair bouncing as she ducked behind a potted plant for cover. The normally composed woman was now utterly flustered, a far cry from her usual aura of control and authority. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, watching the absurdity unfold. It felt surreal, like a poorly scripted comedy where the protagonist had no control over the ensuing madness. The raccoon had become a chaotic force of nature, wreaking havoc among the very people who had decided to protect their neighborhood from so-called visual blight. "Is this some kind of prank?" one member yelled, desperately trying to get his bearings while holding onto a folding chair as if it were a shield. The absurdity of the situation made it hard for Ethan to suppress laughter. After all, how often does one witness a suburban HOA gripped by panic over a mutant raccoon? As pandemonium ensued, some members attempted to corral the creature using brooms and trash can lids like they were in some slapstick animal control mission. The raccoon, emboldened by its newfound strength, dodged and weaved effortlessly between their efforts, leaving a trail of scattered flyers and fallen snacks in its wake. Ethan eventually snapped out of his stupor and charged into action. He needed to regain control of the situation, not just for his own sake but for everyone involved. "Everyone listen up," he shouted above the commotion. "We need to work together to stop it before someone really gets hurt." A few members turned their attention toward him, momentarily pausing in their frenzied attempts to capture or evade the furry menace. Ethan quickly devised a plan. "We can herd it towards the back exit. If we all move slowly and calmly, we might be able to guide it outside without further incident." With newfound determination, Ethan rallied volunteers amid much hesitation. some still eyeing the raccoon warily from behind anything that provided cover. Together, they formed a line across the hallway leading to the exit while Ethan circled around back to cut off any potential escapes. As they moved cautiously forward, the raccoon paused for a moment, perhaps sensing their intentions. It crouched low, but then darted toward Ethan with surprising speed. He barely managed to sidestep as it zoomed past him again, leading to an uproar of laughter mixed with shrieks among onlookers. In a whirlwind of arms and limbs attempting reign in the unpredictable situation, Ethan realized he needed something more than just brute force against this newfound chaos. He glanced around for anything he could use, a distraction perhaps. Just then, he spotted a half-empty bag of chips lying near one of the overturned tables. "Chips!" he shouted excitedly. "Grab those chips, we can lure it out." A fellow member handed him the bag with shaky hands as Ethan tore it open and began shaking it vigorously. The distinct sound drew the raccoon's attention instantly. Watching it shift focus from chaos causer to snack seeker was like witnessing magic unfold in real time. Maybe they could regain control over their lives after all, even if only briefly amidst this slapstick storm of suburban absurdity. With determination rallying behind him, Ethan prepared for another escapade, this time armed with chips instead of fear as he took one step closer to reclaiming both his fridge and some semblance of normalcy amidst rising hilarity. As the dust settled from the chaotic scene in the clubhouse, Ethan took a moment to catch his breath. He had successfully retrieved the fridge amidst the confusion, but the victory felt bittersweet. The absurdity of the day weighed heavily on him. He was now acutely aware that this incident was merely the tip of an iceberg. The HOA's actions had not only endangered public safety with their hasty towing, but had also compromised a vital military asset. With his hands resting on the fridge, Ethan felt a surge of determination. He couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to uncover regarding the HOA's procedures surrounding towing regulations and community communications. Their lack of transparency and disregard for individual circumstances were glaring red flags that warranted investigation. It was time to dig deeper. Ethan took out his phone and began researching local HOA regulations while still standing in front of the utility closet where everything had unfolded. The more he read, the more he realized that many of their protocols were vague at best and at worst outright negligent, towing without notice, imposing penalties without proper channels for appeal. It all reeked of mismanagement. Fueled by indignation, he decided to compile his findings into a formal complaint against the HOA. Gathering evidence would be crucial. He needed to document not only his case, but also any other instances where residents might have been wronged by this self-righteous organization. He remembered overhearing other neighbors grumble about minor infractions being weaponized against them in favor of maintaining a polished image for Maplewood. Ethan set out on foot around the neighborhood, speaking with residents who were either frustrated or fearful of speaking out against the HOA. Many shared stories of arbitrary fines for trivial issues, like an untrimmed hedge or a car parked too close to a neighbor's driveway. Each tale added weight to his resolve. They had all been victims of misguided enforcement. After gathering enough testimonies and documentation, Ethan returned home and sat down with a laptop. He crafted a letter detailing his grievances against the HOA's practices, citing specific violations and calling for accountability. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he poured his frustration into words, detailing how their negligence could have led to disastrous consequences, not just for him, but potentially for others as well if they continued down this path unchecked. Once satisfied with his draft, Ethan decided to schedule an appointment with an attorney who specialized in homeowners association disputes. This was not just about recovering his lost Vial, it was about protecting others in the community from similar incidents occurring in the future. He submitted his complaint late into the night, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement at what lay ahead. He knew he was embarking on a challenging fight against an entrenched system that thrived on fear and compliance, but he was ready for it. Ethan understood that sometimes battles needed to be fought not just for oneself, but for everyone impacted by those wielding unwarranted power. With resolve hardening within him, he turned off his laptop and glanced out the window at Maplewood's tranquil facade, knowing it held secrets far darker than its manicured lawns would suggest. This might just be beginning. He could no longer stand idly by while chaos lurked beneath their pristine surface. Ethan's investigation into the Maplewood HOA quickly revealed a tangled web of procedural violations and corrupt practices that ran far deeper than he had initially anticipated. After submitting his formal complaint, He was surprised at the responsiveness of the attorney he consulted, who encouraged him to dig even deeper into the HOA's operations. Equipped with newfound resolve, Ethan set about examining public records and previously unreported grievances from residents. He discovered that the HOA had consistently failed to follow proper protocols regarding towing notifications, imposing penalties without adequate documentation or justification. Residents had voiced concerns over arbitrary fines for minor infractions, ranging from poorly trimmed hedges to misplaced garden gnomes, an ironic twist given the chaos that had erupted over his own fridge. As he pored over endless pages of documentation, one situation particularly caught his attention. A fellow neighbor had once been fined for leaving a trash can out overnight, despite a confirmation from the waste management company that collection had been delayed due to vehicle issues. The HOA had dismissed the appeal without so much as a hearing, siding instead with its own unwavering beliefs about maintaining property values. Stories like this echoed through his mind, confirming suspicions that the organization was more focused on appearances than on fair governance. Ethan reached out to the wronged neighbors, gathering testimonies that painted a picture of an HOA entrenched in corruption. Some members spoke of fear, as if voicing their grievances would lead to retribution or further harassment. This created an environment where financial and emotional burdens were imposed on residents simply trying to live peacefully in their homes. With enough evidence in hand, Ethan began to compile formal documentation highlighting the HOA's inconsistencies and procedural negligence. He marked instances of miscommunication where vital information was often withheld from residents, particularly concerning community meetings and decision-making processes. It became evident that many residents remained blissfully unaware of their rights under local housing laws. As his investigation progressed, Ethan also uncovered instances where board members had improperly conducted votes without needed quorum or transparency, further undermining the integrity of their governance. It was apparent that the HOA held itself above any scrutiny and operated with impunity, casting aside the very community it claimed to protect. The culmination of these findings ignited a fire within Ethan, a determination to bring these revelations to light not just for himself, but for every resident impacted by the HOA's pervasive grip on their lives. He envisioned organizing a town hall meeting where residents could openly discuss their grievances, forcing accountability upon those in charge. Emboldened by a sense of purpose, Ethan started drafting a comprehensive report detailing each violation, along with proposed reforms aimed at restoring trust and fairness within the HOA's operations. He knew this wouldn't be an easy fight. Pushing back against a long-standing authority with deep roots in the community was daunting. However, Ethan felt it was a fight worth having, not only for himself but for every neighbor who had suffered in silence under the weight of a misguided system. With resolve strengthening within him and the sun setting over Maplewood's manicured lawns, Ethan understood that this was no longer just about reclaiming his fridge or addressing rogue raccoons. It was about enacting real change. The battle against the HOA's corruption had only just begun, and Ethan was ready to see it through to the end. With the momentum of his investigation behind him, Ethan felt a sense of urgency solidifying into a clear resolve. It was no longer enough to simply gather evidence and rally fellow residents. He needed to take decisive action against the HOA. The violations he had uncovered were not mere oversights. They reflected a systemic abuse of power that had gone unchecked for far too long. Ethan reached out to the attorney who had initially guided him through his complaint. Armed with a portfolio filled with testimonies, documentation, and a comprehensive outline of the HOA's procedural failures, he set up a meeting to discuss potential legal action. The attorney listened intently as Ethan presented his case, nodding thoughtfully at each revelation about the board's lack of transparency and fairness. "From what you've shown me, it seems you have a solid basis for a lawsuit," the attorney stated. "We could argue that they've not only violated their own bylaws, but also state laws regarding fair housing practices. The key will be rallying support from other members in the community who have faced similar issues." Encouraged by this feedback, Ethan quickly devised a plan to gather more widespread support. He called upon the neighbors he had spoken with during his investigation and organized a community meeting at his home, inviting anyone willing to share their experiences with the HOA's tyranny. The response was overwhelming. Disgruntled residents poured in with stories of fines levied for minor infractions, intimidation tactics used against those who dared complain, and even instances of exclusion from community meetings. As voices filled his living room with shared outrage, Ethan felt their collective energy spark something powerful within him. It became clear that this was no longer just about his individual grievances. It was about standing up against an organization that thrived on fear and control. Together, they discussed strategies for approaching the situation, from gathering signatures for a petition to sharing their experiences on social media. Ethan proposed that they take legal action together as a unified front. "If we collectively file against them," he said passionately, "we can hold them accountable for their actions and demand changes that benefit all of us in Maplewood." The group nodded in agreement, excited by the prospect of taking back their power. They discussed potential fundraising ideas to cover legal fees and strategized how best to present their case without fear of retribution from the HOA. Feeling emboldened by his neighbor's willingness to fight alongside him, Ethan began drafting formal documents outlining their claims as he worked closely with his attorney. They would present evidence not only of procedural violations, but also how these actions fostered an environment of fear among residents, an environment that contradicted the very essence of community living. As they prepared for battle against their HOA, Ethan realized this journey would be fraught with challenges ahead. But together with his neighbors, now allies, they formed a coalition bound by a shared desire for justice and reform within Maplewood. The thought of standing shoulder to shoulder with those who had once felt isolated gave him strength. This wasn't merely about reclaiming his fridge anymore. It was about reclaiming their community's integrity and ensuring that no one else would endure what they had faced under the HOA's oppressive rule. With renewed determination burning in him like never before, Ethan set forth into this next chapter, one marked not just by personal resolve but by collective action, a true testament to what happens when neighbors unite against injustice. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the atmosphere in the packed courtroom was thick with anticipation. Ethan sat at the front table, flanked by his attorney and a handful of supportive neighbors who had rallied behind him. The tension was palpable, but there was an undercurrent of humor that lightened the mood. Small jokes were exchanged among supporters about the absurdity of the situation, a neighborhood HOA going to court over a fridge incident that had spiraled into chaos. As the judge entered and settled into her seat, she glanced at the assembled crowd with a bemused expression, clearly accustomed to less outrageous cases. The bailiff called for order, and whispers faded into silence. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline as he prepared to present his case, knowing that this moment held significant weight not just for him, but for every resident who had been unfairly treated by the HOA. The HOA's representation consisted of a slick attorney who exuded confidence, ready to downplay their missteps while portraying Ethan as an opportunist looking to exploit the situation. As she presented her arguments, Ethan could hardly contain his disbelief. She argued that towing his fridge was merely an enforcement of community standards, framing it as a necessary action to maintain property values. Ethan's attorney stood to rebut the HOA's claims, showcasing documented evidence of procedural violations and testimonies from residents detailing their own negative experiences with arbitrary fines. Laughter erupted when they played audio from an HOA meeting where board members nonchalantly dismissed concerns about towing practices with phrases like, "It's just part of maintaining order." The courtroom erupted in chuckles at the irony of bureaucratic language falling flat in the face of real community concerns. As testimony unfolded, several neighbors shared their stories. One resident recounted how her decorations led to threats of fines despite their popularity during community gatherings. Another described being penalized for a car parked too close to a neighbor's driveway when it was actually blocking a fire hydrant. Each tale added layers to the case against the HOA, highlighting their negligence and lack of regard for community voices. Ethan watched as laughter gave way to tension during cross-examination. The HOA's attorney attempted to discredit witnesses by suggesting they were merely disgruntled residents looking for excuses. But each witness held their ground firmly, bolstered by Ethan's unwavering support from their growing coalition. Finally, it was time for Ethan to take the stand. He felt both nervous and empowered as he recounted his experience, the frantic race against time to retrieve his fridge and how it led him down this winding path toward justice. He explained how this fight transcended personal grievances. It was about protecting all residents from arbitrary actions that undermined their sense of community. As closing arguments were made, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and anxiety. The judge seemed engaged, nodding thoughtfully at key points raised by both sides. After what felt like hours waiting for the verdict, the judge returned to deliver her ruling. Her voice echoed through the still courtroom. After careful consideration of the evidence presented and testimonies given, it is clear that the HOA's actions have not only violated procedural protocols, but have also fostered an environment detrimental to its residents' rights. Cheers erupted from Ethan's supporters while he felt tears well up in his eyes. The ruling was not just a victory for him, it signified poetic justice against bureaucratic misuse. The judge ordered reparations for damages incurred by Ethan and mandated changes in HOA procedures going forward. As he left the courtroom hand in hand with fellow neighbors who had fought beside him in this battle, Ethan understood that this victory meant more than winning a case. It marked a new beginning for Maplewood, one where accountability would reign over oppressive control, instilling hope for future generations within their community. In the months following the courtroom victory, the transformation within Maplewood was nothing short of remarkable. The HOA, now facing intensified scrutiny, promptly initiated changes in governance that had long been overdue. With Ethan and his coalition watching closely, they enacted transparent towing policies and improved communication channels for community grievances. Homeowners could finally voice concerns without fear of retribution, fostering an environment of trust and cooperation that was previously absent. The sense of empowerment rippled not only through human residents, but also surprisingly extended to their fellow creatures. After the raccoon incident, wildlife experts were called in to assess the effects of the unexpected serum consumption. To everyone's astonishment, it turned out the mutated raccoons were not as uncontrollable as first thought. Experts explained that while they had grown larger and stronger, the raccoons displayed heightened intelligence and social behaviors that moved them further from their originally chaotic reputation. Instead of summarily eliminating these new residents, the community decided to embrace the change. A local wildlife rehabilitation group partnered with the neighborhood, establishing safe zones for these creatures while educating residents on how to coexist peacefully with them. This prompted a more humorous take on what once seemed like impending disaster. Community events began to incorporate raccoon-themed activities, including Raccoon Awareness Days, where children learned about local wildlife conservation and responsible ways to handle encounters with nature. Ethan himself became somewhat of a local hero, his name synonymous with change and resilience in Maplewood. Not only had he rallied neighbors to reclaim their rights against poor governance, but he also inadvertently opened up conversations about environmental stewardship and community responsibility toward all living beings around them. Meanwhile, amid discussions about how best to manage interactions with the mutant raccoons, Ethan's initial concerns about property values shifted toward a more holistic approach to community welfare and aesthetics. Residents took pride in cultivating gardens that attracted nature's bounty, encouraging biodiversity, instead of merely maintaining sterile lawns devoid of life. As word spread about Maplewood's evolution both in governance and its newfound harmony with nature, neighboring communities began reaching out for advice on enacting similar reforms. They too wanted to foster neighborhoods where residents could thrive in a respectful relationship with each other and their environment, a ripple effect caused by one man's resolve to stand up against bureaucratic control. At neighborhood meetings, laughter mingled with serious discussions about improvements. Humorous anecdotes emerged around their once feared local raccoon population, now being celebrated as the fuzzy guardians of their gardens. Children wove tales of superhero raccoons inspired by those quirky creatures that had somehow become symbols of resilience rather than chaos. Ethan stood amazed at how far they had come, from a simple fridge incident leading to chaos inside a clubhouse to transforming not only the HOA's practices, but also revitalizing community spirit and ecological awareness. It became clear to him that each hurdle faced during this journey brought vital lessons learned about empowerment and collaboration, lessons steeped in joy amidst adversity. As he watched families gather for picnics surrounded by flowering bushes buzzing with life, both human and animal, Ethan couldn't help but feel proud. The chaotic chapter may have started with an errant left fridge, but ended up opening doors to harmony among neighbors and nature alike, a legacy that would resonate for generations in Maplewood.